Very, very much. Okay, well, usually when I introduce someone, I start with their professional side, but this speaker we have is just a very wonderful person, and so I want to let you know some things you might not know about him. He's also a musician. He's an entertainer. He's a motorcycle enthusiast. And, it's one thing to have knowledge, and you want your speaker to be informed. Okay, that's important. But it's another thing to be wise. And I consider John a wise man. I think he has good judgment. He's also a very pleasant person. So it's nice to be in the company of pleasant people. On his professional side, I would say he's by far the best product trainer in the company. He was personally mentored by one of the leading scientists of all the 20th century, Dr. Arthur First, who was the founder of the Stanford Cancer Research Lab. John is a member of the New York Academy of Science, of the Council for Responsible Nutrition, and he's a member of the elite, prestigious NeoLife Scientific Advisory Board. So we have a total expert here, a very pleasant person. You're going to learn a lot, so please join me in giving a very warm welcome to Scientific Advisory Board member John Miller. Give him a big hand. Thank you, John.
Hello, everyone. Let me get my device. What is it telling us here, Bob? It says this machine can't connect to the iCloud because of a problem with the Bob Pearson. It's blaming you. Whatever it is, it's blaming you, not me. So anyway, it's wonderful to be back in Eugene. I've been going in and out of PDX here for a few days now. I think I've made 4 trips through PDX. I got one more to go tonight, just to service the Northwest Territories up here. I was in Washington and Idaho, and now back over here. So I'm getting to know your airport up there really well, and probably better than I really want to be honest with you. Anyway, it's great to be back here in Eugene. I've been having a great trip. This is stop number 8 or 9. I've lost track. I've still got many to go. I think 14 or 15 by the time I'm done here at the end of the month. And it's been a lot of fun sharing this message. To give you a little background on me real quick though, I'm just a regular person who had an opportunity to get involved in an amazing thing called NeoLife years ago. And it was luck or fate or divine intervention. I don't know how you want to make it work out, but anyway, needless to say, it brought me to an opportunity where I spent my entire adult life finding ways to try to help people. Okay? That's the goal of the company, is to find ways to try to help people. And we do that by giving you 2 things. Basically, knowledge, because knowledge empowers you, right? And then tools, because tools are the things you need the knowledge to be wielded, right? If you're going to get knowledge, you need tools to wield it. So that's really what we've been doing, is going around doing that for years. And that's what I've been doing on this last little series of speaking events as well. So what I want to do is I want to get right into it. There's 3 things that I want to achieve today for you, and that is I want to draw attention to a global health problem that is going to change the world as we know it. And I'm going to explain how. But I shrunk, huh?
You have the remote?
Yeah.
Go back one.
Oh, back one? I didn't go forward one yet. Try that. And I got blotchy.
You need to take more vitamins.
No, actually, that will not be what the problem is. It's more likely something electronic than it is. Okay, hopefully this will. Anyway, so I want to bring this home to you. There's this, and I think we all hear about it all the time. We know what's going on, but we just don't personalize it. And I want you to be able to personalize it. Okay. The next thing I want to talk to you about is why nutrition is your single most important lifelong tool that you can wield to maximize your potential for health, vitality, and longevity. Going to the doctor and all of that sort of stuff in the medical community is a nice thing to have as a safety net. but it's really a safety net. It's where you go when things get to the point where you can't manage it yourself. And very often it's expensive and somewhat alarming, because when you get in there, you're sort of turning your biochemistry over to other folks who don't necessarily have the same concerns as you have for your personal biochemistry. And they tend to want to get you into a drug cycle rather than get you back to normal health. They want you to lean on those sorts of things. So I want to talk about that a little bit. And then I want to talk about the company and the role the company plays in providing tools to help you win that battle for lifelong health and vitality and stay away from that big industrial medical complex out there. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what makes our company stand out amongst all the others, because we go to great lengths to make sure that we do that. So let's take a look here. First of all, you know there's a worldwide epidemic. Everybody knows that, right? An epidemic of chronic disease. Everybody knows that. Heart disease, cancer, diabetes, stroke, chronic respiratory diseases. They're growing at an epidemic proportion, which means they're rapidly outpacing the growth of the population, occurring more and more frequently. Here's some information about chronic disease in the United States, right? It says chronic disease is the leading cause of death and disability. Okay, I believe that. But look at this. In 2012, about half of all adults, 117 million, had one or more chronic health conditions. Half of the adult population. Now, there's a couple of things about that. First of all, adults are not supposed to be the sick ones, right? It's the aged ones who might get sick. The adults who are supposed to be in their prime, they're supposed to be the ones that have got the strongest immune systems and the greatest ability to control their destiny. It's the really young and the really old that are not. So it's a little alarming when you think of that. It's also alarming when you think of half of the adults. So if there's 230 million adults in this country, fully half of them have one or more chronic conditions. That is not a good situation. And it tends to run right to the course of our country. By the way, this is CDC data from their website just a few weeks ago. Take a look at this. Because of that, 86% of all healthcare spending in 2010 was for people with one or more chronic conditions. 86% of all of the money we spend on healthcare goes to that 117 million people, essentially. Okay. So it's not only is it alarming because it's the adult population that is supposed to be strong, but it's that same strong population that is robbing, if you will, or taking a disproportionately high amount of our health care dollars in this country, within our country, within the whole United States. It happens here in your community, happens in your state, and it happens across the country. Right? Money is being spent on things that are largely preventable. Chronic diseases are largely preventable. We're not supposed to get them. We get them because we allow them to happen to us. But look at this here. In 2010, heart disease and stroke was 315 billion, and in 2012 it was 245 billion. These are all annual expenditures for taking care of these diseases. Cancer care in 2010 was 157 billion, and then just diseases linked to obesity was another 147 billion. So if you add that up, you get about $865 billion a year that we spend just on those things, just those things. Doesn't count all of the Alzheimer's and AIDS and all of that other stuff we have to worry about in our healthcare system, because when people get sick, we take care of them, right? It's something we do. We find the money somewhere. So, if you think of that, do some math with me real quick. As of 2014, there were 318.9 million people in the United States. If you divide that into $865 billion, what do you get? You're good at math. No, you get $2,711.59. That's $2,711.59 for every single person alive today in the United States, from the very most precious newborn baby in the hospital all the way up to the oldest centenarian. It costs each one of us $2,711.59 a year, okay, out of the vitality of our economy. We are the economy, right? There's no people, there's no activity, there's no commerce, there's no. So that's what we survive on. That's what our country runs on. It's how we care for ourselves and build our infrastructures and all of that stuff out of that money. So $2,711.59. If you're a family of four, that's almost $12,000 a year, or almost $1,000 a month that you are paying in the form of taxation and so on and so forth, that's being consumed by these largely preventable diseases. Okay, so it's no wonder we've got this healthcare crisis. The reason we've got a healthcare crisis, if you turn it on the other way around, is because we have a disease crisis. You fix the healthcare crisis by fixing the disease crisis. You don't fix the disease crisis by spending more money on healthcare. You're caring for the disease, you're not fixing them. Okay, big problem. Now, is it going to get better? Well, no, sadly. These are trend lines. We watch this in the Scientific Advisory Board all the time because we see where the future lies, and then we spend our research dollars in that area. This is from a study done back in 2012 by the Rand Corporation. This is funded by the National Institute of Health, and they looked at the trend line for chronic disease in the United States. Back here in 1995, there was something like 118 million people with chronic disease, and by the time you get up to today, 2015, that's about 150 million people, or about a 32 million increase, or if you do the math, about a 30% jump, a little less than that. But if you look at the trend line going out here to 2030, this is going to get up here. So if this is $865 million a year there, what do you think it's going to be up here in 2030? It's going to be $1.5 trillion, maybe, allowing for inflation, and the fact that the pharmaceutical industry is going to want to charge more for aspirin. And all that's whatever it is they got. Their game plan is to be more profitable. So therefore, their only source of profits is going to be money that they extract from the population. Okay? So if you look at that, that's not a pretty picture. We're at $1.5 trillion. I'm not sure the Chinese will want to loan us that much. So where are we going to get it? How are we going to care for all of these people? Because statistics don't lie. Maybe it's not 171 million, maybe it's only 169,754,000, or maybe it's 175 million, but it doesn't really matter. The standard deviation from that trend line is a bad picture, no matter what. Let's take a look at another one. Here's the trend line for diabetes. This is the biggest problem of all of the chronic diseases because of the rate at which it's growing, not only in this country, but around the world. In 1960, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, there were about 2 million diabetics in the United States of America. Okay, if you come along here by 2015, up here you're almost to 20 million, about 18,500,000 and some. So it almost went up 1,000% rather, between 1960 and 2015. It'll be about 55 years, pretty steep climb. But as you continue out here by 2050, this number is out here with a much bigger number, and this doesn't count. This is diagnosed diabetes cases. It doesn't count all the pre-diabetics that are out there, all the people that have diabetes and maybe haven't even been to the doctor to find out. So the trend line doesn't look good, does it? So it's safe to say that that $865 billion isn't going to be enough. And there's only one place that you can get money. You can print it, which we get pretty good at. But it tends to not be a long-term solution, or they can come get it from us. And the way they get it from us is the same way they've been getting it from us. They increase your copay, right? Set your annual deductibles higher, charge more for premiums, charge your employer more for premiums, all of those sorts of things that they do, they're just going to do more of, which is going to continue to escalate the cost of health care, which has the ability eventually to bankrupt our country as we know it, whether it's local health care here in Eugene or the state of Oregon or the country or the world for that matter. The cost of health care eventually will outstrip our ability to pay for it. And if you think about that, what do you do with those sorts of situations? Well, you end up with what we call financial chaos or economic chaos, where countries spend more money than they have, which we're doing already, by the way. Luckily, there's other countries out there that don't follow that same procedure and we're able to loan us some money now and then. But we have $1 trillion debt right now. I'm sure you guys know that. So it's only going to be more trillions of dollars, which, did you see the cover of Time magazine here, just this most recent Time magazine? If you take a look at it, it tells you what your portion of that national $1 trillion debt is. It's a big number. It's a big number. $60,000 we all owe, or something like that. Anyway, so what do you do about this? You have to change this. We have to change the trend lines, right? We have to not just look at it, okay, we'll just come up with money to take care of people. We have to actually change the trend line of disease the other direction. We have to end this trend. We have to find a way to do that because eventually it's just, a long walk on a short pier or whatever you want to call these things. It's disaster. Just wondering out there. Maybe not for me so much, to some extent for me, but certainly for you younger people. And certainly for anybody's children or grandchildren that are on the horizon there, this is a disaster waiting to happen. So how do we do that? How do we end the trend? Well, we know what we have to do. We've known for a long time. It's this right here. We know exactly what we have to do. The Centers for Disease Control, World Health Organization, every major health authority on the planet says do this. They say, manage your weight and get some exercise. And the two of those are closely related because if you manage your weight, you're more likely to exercise. And if you exercise, you're more likely to manage your weight. Okay? It's just basic rules of biochemistry. But most importantly, they want us to do this. They want us to focus on getting diets rich in whole food nutrients because they know it's the absence of whole foods and the excesses of these manufactured things that are supposed to be food, that I call industrial food products. They're made to look like food, but they contain so many chemicals and other things that are foreign to us that they're not really food, they're just industrial food products. Way too much of that. So they want us to get back to this. Okay? They want us to get back to whole grains, fruits and vegetables and fish. And this is what they want us to do. They want us to consume 5 to 7 servings of whole grain every day. Everybody do that today? Anybody got any whole grain today? That man back there, okay, good for you guys, that's good. Whole grain count chocula does not count. Okay. Even though it says whole grain on that, it's not whole grain because it's devoid of all the nutrients that are present in whole grain. It's just got the fiber, essentially, and not that fiber is not good for you, but it's far from whole grain. Okay, so 5 to 7 servings of whole grain, 5 to 13 servings of colorful fruits and vegetables. Anybody get that done today? I had some for breakfast, good for you. Anybody who raises their hand is good, you should start your day that way. Okay, but 5 to 13 servings, I've got a ways to go. Because as much as I've tried at the Hilton Hotel I stayed in last night, you guys got any like strawberries or blueberries? Oh no, just this stuff over here. And they had some like, it was canned, what do you call it, fruit cocktail or something. The only thing colorful in it was the maraschino cherry, and that's because it had been dyed red. So they missed the point. And they want you to eat a lot of omega-3 fish. Well, the reality check is that no one gets this done. No one gets this done, and it's that biochemical problem that is the challenge. This is what we're supposed to do. How are we doing? Well, here's some ideas. Fruit and vegetable, we're still failing to meet minimums. Fruit and vegetable intake, this is established by the U.S. Department of Agriculture. It says based upon who you are, this is what sort of thing you should look at. And these numbers are the start line you want to get to, not the finish line for the day. So you want to get to 5, and then you've hit the start line. And from there on, you're making progress. And so you can see if you happen to be kids 2 to 6, some women and older adults, 5 is what you want to get to, colorful fruits and vegetables. Older kids, teen girls, active women, and most men, 7. Teen boys and active men, 9. So if you look at that, you think, okay, well that makes sense. And you can get up to 13 if you're an athlete or you're particularly active in demanding physical job or something like that, high stress environments, all of those sorts of things. If you're in the military or a lot, then you probably need more. So how are we doing? Well, according to the Centers for Disease Control, as of May 2013, adults on average got 1.1 servings of fruit and 1.6 servings of vegetables for about 2.7. So if you look at that, they're getting about half or a little less, 35–40% of the goal for this group right here. Adolescents, the people who are in their growth and development years, right, establishing the foundation, get even worse. 1 fruit and 1.3 vegetables for 2.3, and they fall into this group here, which means that they're getting somewhere between 1/3 and 1/4 of these things that they need in their diet to promote health. Okay, what's interesting about this though is note that these are averages. These numbers are average. On one end of the scale, you've got people like me who consume 5 or 6 or 10 servings of fruits and vegetables every day, and like you guys, I'm sure. And on the other end, you have the rest of the population who is consuming 0. There's tons of data that says on any given day, actually in any given week, a big portion of the child and adolescent population, the 2 to 18-year-old population, gets 0 fruit, not only for the day, but for the week. Similar things for vegetables on any given day. More than half of the 2 to 18-year-old population in this country gets essentially nothing of this stuff that they need. And right then in your formative years, whatever you're doing at that period of time, you're laying down not only the framework of your body, but you're laying down the psychological memory paths of your food consumption patterns in the future. If you are obese at that point in your life, you are likely to be obese later on, simply because you develop that habit, that sort of approach to food. It's your relationship with food that sets all that up. So this is not a pretty picture. Let's take a look at omega-3s. Omega-3s are critical fatty acids. They're absolutely fundamental for managing the balance of things within our bodies. They are the things that keep us from getting out of control with inflammatory compounds. The inflammatory fats, everything that you get in a fast food establishment is going to be inflammatory. They don't sell any anti-inflammatory nutrients in there. Yet in the scope of things, we are supposed to get one anti-inflammatory nutrient for every 3 inflammatory nutrients. Reality is in this country today, for every 1 anti-inflammatory, we're getting somewhere between 20 to 40 inflammatory. So the load is really biased significantly in favor of inflammation, which is not a good thing. So, and omega-3s are anti-inflammatories, amongst other things. According to, this is from the American Heart Association, for heart health, you want to consume at least 2 servings of omega-3 rich fish every day, or every week. That's sort of the minimum threshold, okay? That a serving of fish would be like a 5-ounce serving of salmon would provide approximately 1 gram of omega-3 fatty acids. So if you think of it in that context, they want you to eat something like salmon at least twice a week. Now, just so you know, tilapia and catfish don't count, because anything raised in fresh water or warm water doesn't produce the omega-3 fatty acids like the deep salt, cold salt water fish like salmon, tuna, mackerel, and sardines, and so on. So if you're eating tilapia, it tastes okay, but it isn't doing you really any good in terms of your biochemistry. Protein, have some protein in it. So you want to get at least about 2 grams a week or 2 servings a week. If for heart disease though, and for heart disease, they're not talking about treating heart disease, they're talking about if heart disease is in your family, if it's something that you want to manage, if it's something that's a concern to you, then you want to consume 1 gram daily. Remember, 1 gram is about what you get from a 5-ounce serving of salmon. So in that particular case, they're recommending that you eat an omega-3 rich salmon meal every day, or something like that, okay? And then over here for high cholesterol, they suggest 1 to 2 grams. High cholesterol, you can change the LDL-HDL ratio by the consumption of omega-3s. You can pump up your HDL levels, you can lower your triglyceride levels, lots of heart health benefits from consumption of this. And they want you to consume 1 to 2 grams daily, which means they want you to have salmon for breakfast and for dinner every day, or something like that. Not very realistic, but nevertheless, you know, it's the American Heart Association. So how are we doing? Well, according to, this is USDA in 2013, average consumption of all fish is less than 1 serving per week. That includes the tilapia and the catfish and things that don't have any omega-3s. When we look at the omega-3 content, most people in this country get about 1.5 servings of omega-3 rich fish, or the equivalent of that, per month, which means we have huge, huge deficiencies. It's such a big problem for deficiencies that according to the Harvard School of Public Health here back in April 2009, omega-3 deficiency became the 6th biggest killer of people in the United States. And the way they got to that is they looked at all of the records of people that have died from diseases, not old age, that doesn't count as a disease. All of the people that have died of diseases, and then they began to look at the biochemical relationships between the disease and the mortality that caused. And they found that so many of those diseases progressed to a point that they shouldn't have, accelerated too fast, and caused premature death, that it was associated with this tremendous deficiency we have in omega-3 fatty acids in our diet. Remember, classically, prior to 1950, and going back as far as you want to measure time, okay, you measure it any way you want, but going back as far, the relationship between the anti-inflammatory omega-3s would be 1 for every pro-inflammatory omega-6 or industrial chemical type things that we see today. And remember that we're now 20 or 40 to 1 is that relationship. So it's no wonder that it would drive this disease problem. It messes with your biochemistry and sets you up for challenges, okay? Here's another one, EPA and DHA, which are 2 of the 8 omega-3s involved in human nutrition, 2 of the most common and most obvious. Only about 17% of the population gets to adequacy of those, even though these things are widely available as dietary supplements and the like. And finally, maybe the most alarming of all these statistics is 73% of new mothers fail to meet omega-3 sufficiency guidelines. The reason that's important is that for all of you ladies that are in childbearing age, in the first trimester of pregnancy, often before you know what's going on, okay, omega-3 fatty acids are critical to laying down the framework for the brain and central nervous system in the fetus. That's where all of that sort of initial structure, if you will, that framework is laid down. The presence or absence of omega-3 fatty acids at that time will determine how well that framework gets established. And how well that framework gets established will determine a lot of things for the future of that child. We know that children who come from omega-3 deficient moms have a much higher risk of ADD and ADHD, much slower learning, much bigger problem with their behavioral challenges as they go forward. Conversely, the reverse is true. When mom has an abundance of omega-3 fatty acids in their diet, that doesn't happen. Okay? And that goes on from the moment of conception throughout your life. Your dependence on omega-3 fatty acids is critical. Every moment of your life from that point forward. Yet, we continue to have, with all of this knowledge, we still have a vast deficiency throughout the population. Talk about whole grain. Remember I talked about whole grains here and how the whole grain count chocolate doesn't count? Well, did any of you get on the grain train here? The U.S. Department of Agriculture and the Food and Drug Administration started the grain train going about 10 years ago. It was an advertising and promotional campaign, a public awareness campaign to promote our understanding of the importance of whole grains in the diet. They spent tens of millions of dollars making nice posters and handing out nice flyers and putting up websites that no one ever visited, right? Because it's the government, right? They think that they can make it happen simply by saying it's the government and we want it to happen. It's like that sign. You have Safeways up here, do you?
Yes.
Yeah. Every time you go into Safeway, you read the sign. You have signs on the side of your door at Safeway. In California, we have a sign that says caution. This facility contains things known to the state of California that cause cancer and reproductive disorders and so on. It's a sign right there. We're very protected in California. Our state's looking out for us. Of course, no one ever reads the sign. And, we'll go sign blind after a while, because then you start ignoring caution signs wherever they are, simply because it's meaningless. When they come right down to it, they think that, well, the reproductive toxin is if you consume 94 bottles of vodka and you're pregnant, it's going to be a problem. So they're putting that sign out there, but they've got a whole bureaucracy devoted to signage. But anyway, I'm going in the wrong direction. Whole grains, it's a really important thing. So they put us on the grain train, spent tens of millions of dollars. This is from the Nutrition Journal just here a few weeks ago. And what it says is that after all that time, today, less than 1% of children actually get to whole grain adequacy on a daily basis. So 99% of our population of children are whole grain deficient, despite the fact that whole grain chocolate exists now. Okay. And only 8% of adults, or somewhat less than 8%. So that means that 92% of the adults and 99% of the children in this country do not get enough of the whole grain that they need to stay healthy and vigorous. Remember that we know these things are important. We know that they're fundamental to us. Everybody knows it. All the health authorities that I mentioned earlier said eat more whole grains, eat more of colorful fruits and vegetables, eat more fish. We all know this. Everybody knows it. But somehow or another, we don't manage to get it done. You want to know one of the big reasons why? Is because it's not very profitable. So neither the food companies nor the pharmaceutical companies want to spend a lot of money delivering that message. It's sort of counter to them, actually. If all of a sudden people got healthier, the pharmaceutical stocks would die, wouldn't they? If all of a sudden people started eating healthier, the companies that manufacture these industrial food products would die, wouldn't they? And they're not doing anything that's going to compromise how good their stockholders feel about the dividends they pay them every quarter. And they live and die on that. They plan to sell us more. So, it's a really big problem, okay? It can be summarized this way: for the mass of the population, we get way too much of the wrong stuff and way too little of the right stuff. It's not rocket science. You can look around, count the number of fast food restaurants within a 10-mile radius of this university here, and it'll give you an idea of what they're feeding themselves. Okay. University kids, I've been around a lot of universities, I've got other things on their mind besides the food supply. Right? They've got sort of social media, and texting, and all of that, and school, of course, going to school. Right? So what we got to do is, if we're going to fix the problem, we got to fix this. The deal is that most people will tell you, however, the mistake is that they would think, okay, I'm going to fix the problem for me, so I'm going to erase the chalkboard of my life, and I'm never, ever, ever even going to walk next to a fast food restaurant anymore. I'm only going to eat things that I can actually pull out of the ground down at the park. You know, I'm going to do it. The problem with that is, it isn't going to work. One, it's too dramatic a change. One, you don't need to be that drastic. The other thing is, when you do that, you don't bring your biochemistry along with you. Your mind fools itself into thinking it can control the body. And it can't. The body's madly signaling. The reason we eat is because, not because our mind decides, oh, I did a calculation and I'm like 26 calories short, so let's have a piece of cake before we go to bed. That isn't how it works. Okay? Something deep down inside signals to you, you know, I need something to eat. I need more calories, I need more sugar, I need more what? And guess what? We take it and go do it. Okay, that's why when they say, would you like me to supersize that? The mind doesn't say, run a calorie calculation, no. The body said, yeah. If the taste buds said, I'd like more fries, please. The more the merrier. You know, that's the way the thing works. So we got to do this. So what you need to do is you need to recognize that if your scale is like that, to whatever extent it is like that, the way to change it is just do small things. Every morning when you get up, you take a little something off the bad side of the scale, and you put a little something on the good side of the scale. Okay, and slowly but surely, you start that process. And by slowly moving that, you not only do you change your behavior, you change what we know as homeostasis. That's the status of your body that it likes to be at. By slowly bringing your body and your biochemistry with you. So when you get there, a couple of things happen. One, you feel better because you got there, and you're going to be biochemically more in balance. But you won't suffer the rebound effect. Because when you do really strange things to your body and you force it to come over here, right, as soon as it gets a chance, it's going to say, Krispy Kreme. And it's going to go right back over there. It's going to go right back where it was because you didn't bring it along for the ride. You got to bring your biochemistry with you. You got to think about it, but you got to bring your biochemistry with you. So take a little something every day, wake up, say, today I'm going to start my day. What am I going to do to start my day that's going to put a little something good on the good side of my scale, and take a little something bad off the bad side of my scale. And that process creates an awareness in you, and that's how every one of us end the trend for us. You end it for yourself first, and then you share that with your family, and you share that with your friends and your coworkers and your neighbors, and you share that with your community, and then we can end the trend, and then we can turn that trend line back the other direction, and hopefully save our country and our society for future generations. You know, you can eat yourself to death, and that applies to a country as much as it applies to a person. So, that's where this product comes in. This is a tool. Okay? This is simply a tool. It is not a food substitute, it is a food supplement. It is made entirely from natural food sources. I'll take you through it. And it is a tool. It is that thing that you start your day by putting a little something on the good side. Okay? And then that's easy. I got that done. Now I want to find out what I'm going to take off the bad side. And it's really not too hard to think about things that you can stop doing. You don't have to stop them forever. It's like not like you can never have a donut again in your life. It's just it can't be the donut and coffee every morning or going to work. Okay? Donut and coffee, skip the donut, have the coffee, something, whatever you got to do, but make those small changes. But this is designed to do that. Okay? It was formulated by the Scientific Advisory Board that Bob talked about. This is the group here. We spent decades doing this. It actually has its roots of the company are in this idea of whole food nutrition. It goes way back to 1958. The Scientific Advisory Board were founded by this fellow here, who Bob talked about. I could spend an hour up here and just barely touch on this guy's achievements. And not only achievements in terms of academic credential, but achievements in how he impacted the entire world with the knowledge that he developed. He was the guy credited with the discovery of chemotherapy. Now, you might not like chemotherapy, but if you happen to have cancer and that's your last hope, then that works. And it does work. It's a terrible thing. You don't want to go through it if you don't absolutely have to. It may make you feel worse. Sometimes it doesn't do what you need to do, but for a big number of people, it actually saves them gives them years, 1 or 2 or 5 or sometimes 50 more years after that. So he was just credited with that discovery when he was the director of the Cancer Research Lab at Stanford University. And then he went on to discover the concept of the chemotherapeutic cocktail, where one or more chemotherapeutic agents, usually in sequence, sometimes together, are used because cancer cells become non-responsive. They adapt to the presence of a single carcinogenic compound, and they sort of change themselves, so you have to hit them with a second punch and a third punch. So very often today, if you go in for chemotherapy, you'll get that chemotherapeutic cocktail. This is this guy. This guy here figured that out. By 1960, he had figured that out. It's a long time ago. Okay, but he spent his life doing that. About 1960, he wanted to change the course, and he started, rather than worrying about treating cancer, finding out what caused cancer, and then finding ways to treat it, he wanted to switch to finding out how to prevent it. And he started that process in 1975. He joined NeoLife because the company's approach and his approach were very much the same. And that is, if you power your natural biochemistry with the things that it needs to protect itself, it can. It's only in the absence of these things that you see the failures. Okay? Not 100% of the time. Some people get dealt a bad genetic card or something like that. But for the mass of the population, that's the way it worked. He came to work, joined the company here, and set us off on a course that resulted in huge numbers of clinical trials and scientific investigations and so on and so forth. Dozens of them where we have put our products through. We and others have put them through peer-reviewed trials. So the product is really very simple. Remember I said you start today? It's just these 4 things. That's a 3 grain concentrate capsule, that's a carotenoid capsule, a cinnamon plus capsule, and a multivitamin mineral. Let me take you through them real quickly. Okay, cells are you. Okay, each and every one of us here is comprised of about 75 trillion, give or take a few, cells. And each one of those cells is going like crazy. Each one of them is doing 100,000 biochemical reactions per second. So if you do 75 trillion times 100,000, you get 7.5 times 10 to the 14th every second. That's biodynamics. That's the speed of life, if you will, in your body. So within that thing, those cells are very active. Things are going on all the time. And how well they work is directly dependent upon the things that are present in your diet. Because guess what? Your body can't build them from things outside. The only source of building blocks your body has is what you actually give it. And if you give it junk, it will produce junk. If you give it good things, it will produce good things. This is particularly true of cell membranes and their relationship with fats. See, cell membranes are made from a lipid bilayer. Fats are fatty acids, right? They're made from a lipid bilayer. And that is 2 layers of lipids put together that form a sphere. In the case of a round cell, they're not all round, but a sphere. And the purpose of that membrane is to keep what's outside and what's inside. Seems a really simple task. It's like a fence. But the reality is it's much more complex than that. Because it has to be more than just a perimeter. It has to be an active transport system. While keeping out what it doesn't want or need, it has to selectively import what it does need. And after it produces energy, it has to export the waste products of that energy production. Okay. Now think of it this way. If you were a pancreas cell, okay, and your job was to produce insulin, okay, you have to have this membrane that keeps what's outside and what's inside. You have to be able to selectively import things that you want because you know what you need. It's in the program. While keeping out all the bad stuff, you have to have everything that's involved in insulin production. So you need some amino acids and some vitamins and some minerals and some lipids, and here you can make insulin. Then you have to export it because insulin doesn't do any good there. It has to be in the bloodstream to help get the glucose out of the bloodstream and into the cell. So in that cell, you've got all of this activity going on, and the membrane has to, again, selectively export insulin, but not other things. So it's a really complicated biodynamic event happening in these membranes. Then these membranes are directly dependent upon the foods that you provide, in particular the lipids and sterols that are supposed to be in the whole range we're supposed to eat. That is the primary source of building blocks for cell membranes in humans and a lot of other animals as well, but we'll only talk about humans today. So the relative presence or absence of these things in the diet is going to determine how well your cells and yes, your body's going to work. It's anybody who makes mortar knows that how much of the cement that you have to make the mortar is going to determine how well the mortar works, whether the bricks stay together or fall apart. In your cells, it's much more complex, but that's it. Whether or not you have the right building blocks determines how well the membranes are going to work. So back in the 1950s, this product here was developed as a result of a group of researchers who were looking into chronic fatigue. And it's a long story. I'm going to summarize it very quickly here. And the story is that chronic fatigue exploded in the population as far as the medical community saw in the 1950s. And they couldn't really figure out why, because prior to 1950, prior to World War II, it was there, but it wasn't really a big deal. But now, all of a sudden, it's there. And it was mostly in those suburban areas where everybody had sort of coagulated in these giant things that we call suburbia. Right? So they started speculating, well, there's something's going on here. To make a long story short, a group of them thought maybe it was dietary. They started looking at dietary changes, and they concluded that a lot of these people had grown up, closer to Mother Nature out there on the farms and in the small towns and villages where they had a different diet, and had come in here where the diet was very, very different. And they came to the conclusion that it was the absence of things associated with whole grains. Whole grains have been the foundation, the staple, if you will, the staff of life for our species all over the planet since day one. Okay, that's been the foundation. It provides the carbohydrates and a number of other things, but it provides these critical lipids and sterols. So what they did is they fed these things back, went back to the folks that were processing the grain to make Wonder Bread and things like that, got that material that was being taken out, put it into a product, went back and gave it to their population of chronic fatigue sufferers, and for a big portion of that group, the chronic fatigue went away. Their conclusion, this is 1955, 54, 55, so they didn't have a lot of insight into cell function, but their conclusion was somehow the presence or absence of these things seems to influence how our cells work. And when our cells work poorly, that's going to cause us to work and feel poorly, chronic fatigue, associated with chronic dysfunction at the cellular level. Okay, so the theory is unhealthy cells, things don't get in, and things can't get out, so the cell is compromised, like it's constipated and starved at the same time. But healthy cells, things transition in and transition out, which happens to let the cell do what it's doing. So anyway, we got treated and grain concentrate in the line since '58. The company opened with this product in the product line. By 1980, we decided we wanted to test the theory, so we went around to a number of universities. OSU was not one, and neither was O. But we went to Illinois and Texas and one back east, and Texas A&M came back with a protocol for us, and they said, we think we can show this by doing a study that looks at a feeding study looking at the presence or absence of whole grains and how it influences things like growth and development and so on. So what they showed, they won that deal. And what they showed is that when treated and grain concentrate was present, it optimized overall growth and development. You can see this is without treated and grain concentrate, and this is with treated and grain concentrate. It's not a huge number. These things won't make you a mammoth or anything like that. It'd just have a more fully developed. On the other side over here, enhanced cardiovascular development, same sort of thing, exactly what you would think. You would see overall growth, the total body, and then specific systems in the body, like cardiovascular system, improved. And basically, this is the big clinker here. They proved that because nutrients were consumed and all of this diet was tracked really closely, that when treated and grain concentrate was present, nutrient utilization efficiency was improved. In other words, they made better use of the food that was supplied to them, which, when you think about it, makes sense because the only place you use nutrients is in your cells. It's the only place they go. They go in, their cells are the individual little life forms, and they're all 75 trillion of them, hopefully working harmoniously together, but it all happens in those cells. So when you can improve the way those cells utilize nutrients, you can improve people's health. Right? And that's what they confirmed our theory. Since that time, there have been many studies that have gone on to look at this. This was 1980, which is like the dark ages in terms of scientific study these days. So let's take a look at this next one. Remember that you need lots of colorful fruits and vegetables. That was the deal. Colorful fruits and vegetables. The colors in fruits and vegetables, in this particular case, are called carotenoids. These are lipid-soluble things. That's what makes tomatoes red, and carrots orange, and spinach yellow. You didn't know spinach was yellow, did you? You thought it was green. It's yellow. The green is just the chlorophyll showing on the surface of the leaf. But if you remove the chlorophyll or you take the spinach leaf and rub it between your fingers, you'll see it yellow. And that yellow in there is the carotenoid, it's called lutein in spinach, that is so valuable to us. Anyway, the reason they do this is carotenoids are fundamental in many ways. They are protector nutrients in our diet. In other words, when we consume them, they go into our bodies and function as protectors against things. They are antioxidant compounds, protecting us from oxidation reactions. They are anti-inflammatory compounds. They don't protect us from inflammatory factors, they protect us from the production of inflammatory factors in our biochemistry. Not the ones that enter through our mouths, but rather the ones that are generated inside our bodies. Okay. And they do a number of things. So we did a lot of work developing this product. It's made entirely from carrots, tomatoes, spinach, red bell peppers, peaches, strawberries, and apricots.
What's up, Bob?
Say what?
Something's on the screen there.
Something's on the screen. Yeah, there's a coat hook on the screen over there. And there's another coat hook over here, or whatever that is. What did you see? Oh, a lion. There was a lion on the screen. I think it's the coat hook, though. The coat hook up.
Okay, there was something about the iCloud too, so.
Oh, okay. Oh, was it?
Yeah.
Okay. There was a message. Okay, I'm glad you saw it. I'm paying attention to these people. Anyway, so we developed this product made entirely from carrots, tomatoes, spinach, red bell peppers, peaches, strawberries, and apricots, all dissolved in virgin olive oil with a pinch of vitamin E. Okay, we developed this product based on the idea of looking at the USDA's data of what was missing from the population's intake, and then identified those primary contributors of those carotenoids and went to those sources and learned how to extract them. When we were doing this back in the 1980s, the technology didn't exist, so much of the work we did, we actually pioneered. We knew that there were a couple of carotenoids that were easy to identify, like alpha and beta carotene, but there were 15 others that we were targeting that no one knew what they were. You couldn't even find them on the HPLC chart because no one knew that this peak meant beta-cryptozanthin, for example. So we actually had to go through and identify all that. It was very rewarding because we got the attention of the scientific community. They knew what we were doing. We did a bioavailability study, the New York Academy of Sciences, that was published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition. New York Academy of Sciences invited us to make a presentation of that data at their seminar called Carotenoids in Human Health, which we did. And in the room that day, there were a group of researchers from USDA. USDA came up to us afterwards and said, wow, that's interesting. No one's ever done this before. No one has actually extracted bioactive substances from whole foods, put them into a capsule, delivered them to people, and shown that not only did they get in their blood, but they do good things once they're there. And they wanted to use that as a model for their own work, so they came to us afterwards and said, could they do that? And we said, sure. And we just gave them like a bunch of carotenoid complex and a bunch of technology, and off they went to do some work. This was at the Human Nutrition Research Center at Beltsville, Maryland, and at the Presidio in San Francisco, USDA's Human Nutrition Research Center. They proved three things. First of all, they proved when carotenoid complex gets into your blood, it hitches a ride around on your LDL cholesterol molecule. That's how it's transported. That's its transport system. Okay. The reason that's important is because while it's doing that, it pays for that ride by defending that LDL cholesterol molecule from oxidative attack. Why that's important is because oxidative modification of LDL cholesterol is one of the primary biochemical pathways that leads to the formation of plaque in your arteries. Okay, an oxygen radical comes along and reacts with that LDL cholesterol, forms a foam cell, and those foam cells, little tiny microscopic little foam cells, begin to accumulate on your arteries, especially in the area of highest pressure around the heart, and you end up 20 or 30 or 40 years downstream needing a triple bypass. Okay. So very important. They proved that. They went around and showed that when carotenoid complex gets in your diet, it actually reduced markers of oxidative attack on LDL cholesterol. Published it in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition. They went on and did a second study where they looked at the impact of carotenoid complex on cell membranes. When the carotenoids get out where they're going, they get off the LDL cholesterol, It's not like a bus system, but anyway, it works as an example. They get off the LDL cholesterol and they take up residence in the membrane. Remember, I said that they are lipid soluble protector nutrients, and membranes, cell membranes are made of lipids, so they just sort of take up protective positions in there. And what the USDA showed is that when the carotenoid complex was present in the diet, it got into the cell membranes, and it reduced markers of oxidative attack on cell membranes. Why that's important is oxidative attack on cells is one of the primary mechanisms of carcinogenesis. It's how cancers start. When the oxidation radical gets in, pierces the membrane, go in, mess with the DNA or mess with the nuclear material, and voila, you've got cancer. Okay? So what they showed in this particular case is that when carotenoid complex was present, it had the ability to reduce markers of oxidative attack on cell membranes by about 45, almost 50%. And finally, in this last study here was the most important. We know that carotenoids modulate immunity in most living systems, humans and monkeys and dogs and so on down the line, but particularly interested in humans. And that means their presence or absence has a direct influence over the strength and of your immune system, how much of your potential immune capacity you will achieve. We know that, for example, because when we bring people or dogs or whatever into an environment and we take bloodline-based bloodline samples and look at their immune markers, if we then put them on a carotenoid-deficient diet, those immune markers will begin to go down. If we then give them carotenoids, they'll come back up. If we take them away, they'll go back down. If we give them back, they'll come back up. So that's what, when scientists say carotenoids modulate immunity, it's their presence or absence has a direct effect on your immune capacity. Okay, so it was a pretty well-known fact, but it had never been shown for a dietary supplement in humans. So they went on to do that. Okay, they took a bunch of people and checked them into a metabolic unit. These are crazy people because for 120 days, everything they ate, drank, breathed, and everything they did within this metabolic unit, they didn't get to leave, go home, do nothing. It was completely controlled by the USDA researchers. They brought them in, did 2 baseline studies, 3 days apart, to establish an average for the immune capacity markers. And then they put them on a carotenoid-deficient diet. At the end of 60 days, they watched this thing go down, 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 down. At the end of 60 days, they tried to give them synthetic beta-carotene, but it did not correct the problem. It went down, 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 down. Okay. At the end of 100 days, they had lost 27% of their immune capacity, whatever their inherent immune capacity was when they entered, 27%. On day 101 to day 120, they just gave them 3 of our carotenoid complex capsules. And this is what happened. In just 20 days, there was a 37% increase in immune capacity. Not only did they recover the 27% that they'd lost in the previous 100 days, but everybody on average ended up 10% above their baseline. And the trend lines for that immune potential said if they had kept feeding them for 20 or 30 or 40 more days, it would have continued. Okay? But they just terminated it at 20 days. They published that in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, went all over the world presenting that evidence at scientific meetings. Really powerful stuff. And it's all about carotenoid complex. Let's talk about omega-3s here for a bit. Omega-3 is very powerful. We talked about how important they are. There are 8 involved in human nutrition. I don't care who you go to. There are 8. We know they're there. If you only have 5 or 2 or whatever, you're not getting all 8, and you need all 8. If you actually eat salmon, you're going to get 8. Okay? If you actually eat tuna, you're going to get 8. The reality is, though, you're not going to get the same amount, depending upon where the salmon came from and the sort of food it ate and the season of the year and all sorts of other things. But nevertheless, you're supposed to get all 8 of these. They are very important because they play a number of roles. We know that omega-3s are important for heart health. We know that they're important for anti-inflammatory capacity. But for example, one of the things that you probably don't know is that you all know that you have an automatic healing system in your body, right? If you cut yourself or break a bone or something, you're not responsible to sit there and make it heal. You got this automatic healing system in your body. This is driven by a series of biomarkers called autocoids, and autocoids are the things that are the molecules of not only messaging about what's going on, directing the thing to heal, but the organization of things that actually cause bones to stitch together, or tissue to regenerate, or scars to form. All of those sorts of things are driven by these signaling molecules called autocoids. And those autocoids are dependent on 3 things that are called eicosanoids. And eicosanoids are omega-3s, in particular icosapentaenoic, tetraenoic, and pentanoic, 3, 4, and 5. It's a molecular differential, okay, just the way the molecules put together, but those three are called icosanoids. They feed the cytochrome system, and they are responsible, excuse me, for that function going on in your body. So how well that happens is determined by the presence of these. Most people in this country, because of the absence of these omega-3 fatty acids, or near absence of them, go around with a compromised healing system. It takes them longer to heal than it should, and sometimes full and complete healing doesn't really occur. We actually published a paper in conjunction with a fellow at UC Berkeley, whose name is Carsten Groening, who had moved out from Harvard, who is credited with developing this understanding of the relationship between omega-3s and healing. We published this paper with him. It was presented in a number of different scientific journals. And ultimately, that work is the work that ended up getting referenced in the New England Journal of Medicine about the importance of omega-3s in your diet every day. We were the only company referenced with human data. So we take this very seriously. Omega-3s promote heart health, youthful brain function, flexible joints, healthy eyes, and we talked about their importance in fetal development earlier. We screen them for a lot of things. The thing about fish is they hardly ever show up with a passport, so you don't know where they've been. Okay? And it's hard to communicate with them, so we actually, despite the fact that we're pretty sure that if we caught them up in deep North Atlantic waters, that's where they came from, we still look for things. For example, we know that off the mouth of every river in every major industrial part of the world, Mississippi or wherever you want to go, certain agricultural and industrial pollutants flow out into the water. It happens all the time. Every continent has got what they call continental drainage, things that are on the continent working its way to the water. So we've identified those, more than 200 of them, and every time we get a batch of this fish oil, we look to screen for 200 of them. If we detect the presence of any of those, we have a zero detection policy. If we detect any, that batch is rejected. Okay, that's what this refers to here. You know, we like to do clinical trials. I'll tell you about this one that we did here a while ago. This is an 8-week study. It's called an intervention trial. The difference between an intervention trial and a regular trial is in an intervention trial, you tell people, just don't do anything other than what you're doing and just do this one thing. It's much better than dragging people into a laboratory or a metabolic unit, because that's not a real world experience. Okay? So an intervention trial is done in a real world experience. In this particular case, we took a group of people, well-educated, well-fed folks from Silicon Valley. We made sure that no smokers, nobody on blood pressure medication, none of that. You had to be healthy. Okay? And only then did you qualify to get into the trial. And in that trial, we said, we don't want you to do anything, just keep going with your life here, just take 3 of these a day. And we still omega-3 salmon oil plus capsules a day. And to make a long story short, what we proved at the end of the 8 weeks trial is they're bioavailable, they get into your body very quickly, but more importantly, they are rapidly bioutilized. They are taken up into cell membranes almost immediately. For example, in red blood cell membranes, we saw the amount of omega-3s in red blood cell membranes increase, while the amount of arachidonic acid, an inflammatory fatty acid, was decreased, already starting to change that relationship between inflammation factors there. It was cardioprotective. Those people who came in didn't have any real heart disease problems, but it improved their LDL to HDL cholesterol ratio, boosted HDL cholesterol levels, improved the ratio between HDL and total cholesterol, and lowered triglycerides by an average of 17%. The group that came in that didn't have a triglyceride problem didn't do anything to them, but the group that came in with the highest triglyceride levels got the greatest benefit. Okay? And finally, we showed that it balanced inflammation. Now, inflammatory balance is critical because this is a biochemical reality. Chronic inflammation leads to chronic disease, and the relationship between inflammatory fats that we've already talked about, it's supposed to be 1 to 3, it's actually 1 to 20 to 40 now. Okay, big deal. That's the driver here. So the next time you go to your doctor, I'd like you to remember to ask this person a question. You say, doctor, what is my inflammatory index? Everybody should know their inflammatory index. Basically, your inflammatory index is a series of biochemical markers that they manage, that they can look at, and they can tell you where you are relatively on this scale of inflammation. And where you land on the scale of inflammation is a determinant of your future risk of disease. It's not an expression of a disease state today. It's an expression of your biochemistry that would tell you that if you are inflamed, if you're high up on the inflammatory index, the probability of disease is greatly increased, as opposed to if you are down at the anti-inflammatory end, the probability of disease is greatly reduced. To make a long story short again, you could read about this online, by the way, if you want. At the end of 8 weeks, the average reduction in inflammatory index value for that patient group population, I mean, they're, like I say, Silicon Valley folks, they weren't in bad shape to begin with, moved from a number that was marginally to significantly biased towards disease in their future to a 68% reduction that meant there were probability of no disease. So the big change, a 68% swing in just 8 weeks in their inflammatory index, all because of the presence of this omega-3 fatty acids. This was presented at the annual meeting of the American Dietetic Association, where the dietitians go every year, and was then published in the Journal of the American College of Nutrition, which is the publication, the peer-reviewed publication of that group. You don't get to do this unless you're invited. We get published in their journals before and presented at their events before. So when they heard about our research, we got an invitation almost right away. So, and finally, I'm going to talk about the essential vitamin mineral thing. You know why? Because essential vitamins and minerals are essential. Everybody needs to get them. You need to have them. I'm not going to take you through each one of those things, but I can tell you that anytime you are deficient in an essential vitamin and mineral, it is somehow compromising your health. And we know that. That's why just about every doctor will say, well, take a multi. Right. They won't go beyond the idea of taking a multi and tell you, well, you should actually take one that matches your body's needs, or you should actually take one from certain sources. But they believe that everybody in the country should take a multi because they know that deficiencies in even these simple things like vitamin A or vitamin B1 or whatever can set you up for disease. We know that too. We put a bunch of those in there, 21 vitamins and minerals, just to fulfill that because we want to make sure that if you're taking this product, that is not going to be a problem. I'm going to touch on this slide, but essentially this box represents a 30-day supply, and at the end of that 30 days, when you consume it, you will have gotten the lipid and sterol equivalent of 35 pounds of whole grain, of 80 pounds of the raw fruits and vegetables, the carrots, tomatoes, spinach, etc., and about equivalent to 10 5-ounce salmon steaks. Okay. Now, these are not, I think I said this earlier, these are not food substitutes, but food supplements. We want you to eat this stuff. Okay, you need to eat this stuff, the food. But what we do is we find a way to address the realities of everybody's life that says, I can't do this every day. I can't get to 13, I can't get to 9, I can't get to 5, I can't have fish every day. You know, my life is too busy, my job is too busy, my family just isn't going to happen with him. So this is where it becomes a tool. It's that thing that you can do every day to give yourself just a little bit of those things that you need, those things that are deficient. It's the good thing that you put on the good side of your scale while you work on taking the bad things off the bad side. Now, they are foods in the sense that they all come from, everything I talked about there came from food. It came from carrots or fish or grain. Okay? That all came from food. And it's the exact things that the USDA and the World Health Organization and all the others know that is absent from our diets and is thus driving the chronic disease epidemic. Okay? Just to put this together, the marketing department likes me to throw this slide in. But if you're going to start your day off with something positive, this is the best possible relationship that you can do. And the reason is every time, you know what you do when you get up in the morning, you break fast, right? You haven't. And hopefully, since you went to bed last night, you haven't been eating. You've been eating while you're sleeping. You should see something about it. But most of us go to bed. Really, you should stop eating a couple of 3 hours before you go to sleep. So let's say that you stopped at 8 o'clock and you slept till 7 o'clock the next morning. So that's 11 hours. During that 11 hours, you have been fasting. It's called a short-term metabolic fast, which is a matter of hours. But because while you're sleeping, the biodynamics of your body is going crazy. It does more while you're asleep than it does while you're awake. You are depleting very valuable pools of nutrients there. In particular, you are depleting amino acids. Amino acids come from proteins, and those are the things that that make the more than 500 enzymes that facilitate all the reactions in your body that are used to make lean muscle mass and all sorts of things that are involved in the epinephrine and norepinephrine and serotonin and stuff that's going on in your brain. All of those are amino acid dependent. So when you wake up in the morning, this is such a well-established pattern of consumption that your medical doctors, in a research sense, will tell you every one of us wakes up in what we call nitrogen deficit. Nitrogen deficit is just another way of saying the primary supplied component of nitrogen in your diet is protein, and you are, because the nitrogen is low, the protein has been used up. So the most important thing you can do every morning is get some protein going. Excuse me. So now what I want to do, I don't know how long I'm going about, but I'm going.
Fine.
I'm fine? Okay. You'd say that if I was 2 hours over. Can I get a glass of water, please? Who knew it was dry in Oregon? It's supposed to be wet up here. It's not wet in my throat. Anyway, what I want to do right now is all that information I just told you is wonderful, right? It's wonderful, great stuff. But if we don't have full and complete control over the things we use to make these products, the promise of the science and the research studies and all of that may not come to pass. And there's something that you should know about nutrients the way we approach this program, and that is that nutrition is a far more important and demanding craft than pharmaceuticals, for example. Because when you consume a pharmaceutical, it gets into your body and it goes through your body and leaves. Okay? When you consume a nutrient, it gets into your body and it becomes part of you. It takes up residence. What happened there was that I've been traveling for a while, and at the 34th millionth word, my voice said, give me a break. But you notice that I chewed a little ball seed, and it's going to clear up now. It's going to be a little hoarse for a bit, but it's going to come along. And the reason is because it just clears all of that junk up that got in my throat. So anyway, it would be a problem if we couldn't deliver the nutrients, right? If we couldn't make sure they were there. So we have this approach that's called, I'm going to talk about it in terms of farm to table, but it's the process we go through to select our nutrients and control them. For example, here's what we get. Everything that goes into every NeoLife product must meet our stringent quality control requirements. Where did that everything go? Here. So, every supplier of every ingredient must qualify to be in our product, and then must re-qualify. So if you're selling us carrots, we'll go through a big process of qualifying you as a supplier. We'll let you send them to us, but the very next time you come, you got to re-qualify again. Just because you did it once doesn't mean you can do it every time. So every supplier must qualify, and then re-qualify to be a supplier each and every time. So let's take a look at what that means from the farm to the field. In our supply network, we actually go and identify the regions or areas where certain crops are grown. For example, if we were looking for carrots, we know that certain regions of the world, certain regions of the country have the right kind of carrots, like in North Florida, for example, is a big carrot region. So we'll go there, we'll identify the region, we'll look around at the growers and suppliers, and we'll find out what they grow, and then we'll allow them to submit their carrots to us for qualification. And as long as they can prove certain things to us, then they can become a supplier of carrots. In particular, we're interested in the type of carrots that you grow, your history as a grower, what your reputation is amongst the growing community, what the surrounding environment is like, and specifically the type of carrot that you're growing, specifically the genetic identity of the type of carrot that you're growing. Because you can only sell us a carrot that fits a certain genetic signature. That's the way we keep genetically modified organisms out of our products, one way. So anyway, if you're out there doing that, you're able to sell us some carrots, And we say, okay, good, send us carrots or tomatoes or spinach or whatever it might be. And it applies to dairy products and fish, and everything goes through the same sort of process. We're just using a farm table thing here as an example. Once we select those things, we monitor what's going on in those crops. And when they come into our facility, the first thing they do is go into quarantine, even though we know who they are and what they're making and so on. But they come into quarantine, and at the quarantine point, we evaluate whether or not that supplier has delivered all the things that we demand of them. Did they give us all of the data, the certificates of analysis that tell us about carotenoid content and the genetic identity and all of that stuff? And then we revalidate that ourselves. We have a trust but verify policy. We trust our suppliers, but we still double check. Okay? If they don't like it, they don't need to be our supplier. It's just a trust but verify process. This is again where we reconfirm that there's no genetically modified material present. Once it goes to there, it's released and goes into an extraction process. This is the place where we take the carrots, or whatever, but we'll use carrots again as an example, and we get the part that we want. We want the carotenoids in there. The carotenoids are the lipid-soluble components in carrots. So we don't need the fiber from the carrots, and we don't need the water from the carrots, and we don't need the sugar. There's sugar in carrots. Okay? What we do is separate all those things away, and then we leave only the oil. And it's not the oil that we want either. It's a small component within the oil called the carotenoid oleoresin, or the carrot oleoresin. And we extract that. So by this process of eliminating what we don't want, we end up leaving behind what we do want. And that becomes the raw material. We do that with carrots and spinach and tomatoes and on and on and on to get to those things. Okay? And once that process is done and those extractions and concentrations are made, it goes into quarantine again. And in this particular case, we actually stop everything that comes in. We put a quarantine sticker on it, whether it's a drum or a box or whatever, because it's now changed form. It's now a raw material as opposed to previously it had been a plant. It's now a raw material. We control those things at that point. So we physically put quarantine stickers on there that stay there until somebody puts a release sticker on there. It's an analog way of assuring mistakes aren't made. So it goes through a big process of re-verification of potency. Remember, this is the second quality membrane in our quality control system. It came in from the fields and it was stopped when it got there. Once only then, when it passed that, was it moved into making a raw material, and then it stops there. Everything is validated all the way back down the line each time. After this happens, it goes into manufacturing. This is where we turn all of these raw materials into products. Okay, we turn them into gelatin capsules or tablets or powders or liquids or bars or whatever it might be, is the form that the product takes. And they go through this state-of-the-art manufacturing equipment that manufactures the product. It's particularly important when you have these bioactive substances around, because many of them are subject to just the oxygen that's in the air here would be something that would detract from it or damage it. So when we make carotenoid complex capsules, for example, we create a nitrogen-flooded environment that forces the oxygen away, so that when the capsules are formed, no oxidizing agents are in the capsule or in the material. Okay, very, very important technology. Once that's done, guess what? It goes back into quality control. Once more, it is quarantine. This is the quarantine membrane number 3. Okay, and in here is where we go back and recertify everything that's gone on from that point all the way back down to its origin. Everything is validated and certified so that we know that what was in those carotenoids as they entered the product manufacturing actually made it to the product. Okay? Goes through an elaborate process. And then guess what? Only then is it released for distribution out into the sales field. That's when it goes into the distribution system. And as it enters distribution, it goes through one last quarantine step, and that is that we assure that everything that's gone on, all the paperwork and all the data, is collected in a very, what we call a linear dispersal trail. What that means is that when you look on the side of our bottles, or the bottom of the bottles or boxes, you'll find a batch number. That batch number integrates to everything that happened in that product all the way from its point of origin up to that point. If I were to take you into the laboratory and type that number into our computers, it would pop up and say carotenoid complex batch number so on and so forth is made on this day, on this machine, by this guy, at this time, and has all of these quality control criteria. If I then clicked on the raw materials section of it, it would open up and say that has this batch of carrots, this batch of spinach, this batch of tomatoes, and da, 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 da. Now, if I click on this carrots, he would open up and say, this batch of carrots came from this source that was manufactured, extracted at this point, and goes back to that field with this genetic identity. Okay, that's a completely linear, completely traceable quality control system. Far more sophisticated than most of them. Far more sophisticated than many of the drugs. I won't say many of the drugs that are out there, even though it's food. But remember the difference I told you. When you take a drug, it goes in your body, it goes away. When you take one of our products, it goes in your body and it stays there, it becomes part of you. And for us, that is a much bigger demand than just producing a pharmaceutical. So we go to great lengths to assure that these things are case. After all, you know, they're going to get into my grandchildren and my children and myself and my wife and my parents and her parents, and we all take these things. So we have for decades. So we have to be pretty darn sure that what we're doing is good. And there's people here, a few generations of the Pearson family, I think at least two, that know the experience of taking these products for decades. It does really great things for them. So this is an interesting slide. Because of the way we do things, I'll just summarize here, but just real quick. It says, NeoLife products meet or exceed the quality control standards for purity, potency, and consistency of every major regulatory authority in the world. We sell crop nuts everywhere in the world. We sell Salmon Plus everywhere in the world. And they're exactly the same everywhere in the world because of the way we put these things together. And the reality is that when we go to countries, because we sell them all over the world, and we say we'd like to sell this, the information that we provide is much greater than they need. And in Japan, the Japanese will say, well, we want this and this and this, we don't need that, that, or that, but we want that and that. And they get their data and they go away. And it'll be different if in Europe or Africa or Mexico or Canada or Australia than maybe in Japan. But the reality is we already have much bigger criteria on ourselves in terms of how we manage our quality control than any of these regulatory authorities, which is why we're able to sell these products all over the world. Now, just a real recap. Based in nature, backed by science. Hopefully what you got here is the company pays a lot of attention to nature because we are nature. You cannot separate humans from nature. Don't try to say that's nature and this is me. No, we're all in this together. And that's why we focus so much on natural food components, things that belong in the human diet, what we call human natural nutrition. Okay? The other thing is we have a very strong commitment to science. We like to back it up with proof. Not just us doing the proof, but people like USDA and CDC and others, researchers from those groups that have proven their products work as well. And that's important because if you remember, we started out here saying that there's a chronic disease epidemic going on in the world. And the chronic disease epidemic is driven by the mess that our diets are in. Particularly, all of these regulatory authorities want us to consume more whole grains, more fruits and vegetables, and more fish. The reality is when you look at the data, we do a poor job of that. So we have to find some way to change that. And this product is a tool that contains those exact nutrients that are missing from those. The exact diets, so the exact nutrients that those folks are recommending from the exact sources that they want us to consume. And it's that way that we can begin the process of taking this responsibility for ourselves and figuring out a way to end the trend in chronic disease by making these little changes, by taking something like that, putting it on the positive side, taking something off the negative side, we can actually end the trend, turn it around the other direction, and have a big influence on the future health and vitality of not only ourselves, but generations to come. Thank you very much.
Let's give John one more big hand. Now we have a few closing slides, and then we will share some testimonies. We have a wonderful testimony that's going to be shared, and then we're going to try to share a few testimonies that are online, if we can get our mic to work correctly. And then we'll bring John back up for Q&A. So if some of you have some questions you want to ask him, you might want to write those down. Okay, so John mentioned that we want to end the trend. And so let's show you some things the company is doing now. whole grains, as you saw, fruits and veggies and fish are recommended by all these organizations, and we have a little bit of all of that in this product here. Just to sum it up, we got 35 pounds of whole grains in there, the lipids from that, like John mentioned. 80 pounds raw fruits and veggies, 10 servings of omega-3. John said 5-ounce steaks, equivalent to 10. How much would a 5-ounce salmon steak cost you guys? Anybody know what that would cost?
Roughly $4.
About $4. Okay. So there's equivalent of, John, how many steaks would be in there? 5?
No, 10.
10. So we're talking $40. Well, that product there costs less than a cup of coffee. Is it affordable? The price is only $1.33 a day. Isn't that good, you guys? Excellent. Now, I went to Capella's. You guys heard of Capella's Organic Food? And I see a crop might is equal to 1 serving of organic produce. And 1 serving of organic produce costs about $3 to $4, okay? And the crop might in there costs like about 49 cents. Good deal, huh? Yeah. Excellent, excellent. Okay, now the shake, which John talked a little bit about, which is a complete meal, because it's not only got a perfect protein in there, but it's also got 5 grams of fiber and 22 vitamins and minerals. What would you guys say? Have you guys noticed Subway is open for breakfast now? You guys noticed that on the way to work? And so is McDonald's forever. People stop in for breakfast. What do people spend there on the way to work? Or Starbucks? You know, millions of people go to Starbucks on the way to work. What do they spend in those places before they go to work? $6, okay. So here we've got a complete meal. And that's, of course, about $5, $6, $7, $8 for a meal, and plus medical bills, right? Okay. On top of that, your cholesterol drugs, your blood pressure drugs. Well, our shake is only $2.67 per meal. Is that good, you guys? Excellent, excellent. Okay, and so this is a new thing that's been out for probably a little over a year now, but not too many of us know about that. This is the NeoLife Club. And I just want to show you a little bit about that. People can join the club for free now. And in the old days, we had to pay a fee to join so that we could buy it wholesale. Like at Costco, you got to pay how much per year? Every year, how much? $50 to $100 a year, depending on your membership. Well, now, and we used to pay $49 to join. Now people can join for absolutely free, and you can sponsor them. They'll save 15 to 25% off on our products. They get convenient home delivery. And they can qualify to receive health packs for free. They can get a free personal membership website, which is really nice because if you have friends anywhere in the country, another state, whatever, they can go to your website and they can join for free. It doesn't cost them anything. So by having a website, it doesn't matter what part of the country they're in, and you can win big with Be Your Best challenges. Daniel, how much did you win?
$1,000.
$1,000. Stephanie, how much did you win? 2,000. I won 1,000 for losing 10 pounds. Okay? So who else here has won 1,000 or more? Okay, Danny, has your mom won 1,000?
Yeah.
And your sister won how much?
They won 3,000 collectively. Yeah.
How many here would like to win $1,000 in a weight loss challenge? Okay? So if you want to know more about this, talk to us. The company gives away $4,000 every month. To 4 people. Each gets $1,000. And in our little group here from Eugene, we've had probably $12,000, $13,000 in winners. Isn't that nice? So it's both in fitness challenges and weight loss challenges, and you can lose as little as, like me, I lost 10 pounds. My big belly is gone now. So it's very helpful. So okay, so we can win that. Steph won 2,000. It's wonderful. And we have access to coaches. Now, for getting your free product, you can select, these are products that are available. These 4 are available for free through their referral program. It's called 3 for Free. And this is by far the biggest seller, the breakfast pack, which John talked about, the shakes, and the Pro Vitality. That's by far the most popular. And you can get any of these 4 packages for free with the referral program. And the way you do that is, how many here can think of 3 people that, 3 of your friends, that either use vitamins, they have any kind of health issue, or they're really into nutrition, like they watch what they eat, they're into exercise, they care about organic and GMO. How many can think of 3 people? Okay, if you can think of 3 people like that, you can get free product. Refer them to your website, tell them about that. Then this is on the challenge, the weight loss challenge or fitness challenge. And on the fitness challenge, you don't have to kill yourself. You don't have to do a marathon or Ironman. All the company cares is that you do a little bit more than you're doing now. So if you sit on your rear end all day like me in the office, if you say, tell the company I'm going to walk around the block 3 times a day for a month. If you do that, you get to, your name goes in the drawing. Daniel's brother-in-law won $1,000 for riding 20 miles. Okay, on your bike. I can do that in an hour and a half. And he won $1,000 for that. Okay, so you don't have to kill yourself. Daniel, you did yours with push-ups, right? And you did how many?
50 in a row. Worked up to it.
What's that?
Worked up to 50 in a row.
Very good. Give him a big hand. So if you guys want to get in the fitness challenge, weight loss challenge, talk to Stephanie or Hanson's or Janice or I. We can explain a little bit more how to do that. We've got a marathoner right here in front, so yeah, we got to get in that. And this is Chandel, and if we can pull her testimonial, we'll show you a little more on that. John was up with them near Spokane 2 nights ago. She has now lost 77 pounds, and her depression is gone, her acid reflux is gone, her pain is gone. It's just incredible, all that the shakes and Pro Vitality can do for a person. It's just amazing. And there's David. And you guys know diabetes is becoming a major killer in the U.S. You guys know that? Very, very big. And David, when your numbers are supposed to be between 80 and 120. Well, his numbers were around 500. And the way he found out he had diabetes is the signs on the way to work were blurry, so he went to optometrist and thought he needed glasses. Optometrist said, I think it might be more serious, you better go to the hospital. It was right up close to 500. So and even with the insulin pump, which he said is like more high-tech and stuff, it still was running like around 300. Well, he came to a Shake and Learn, which I want you guys to all write this down right now, please, because the Shake and Learn party, just write down www.shareneolife.com, because then you can go see a 30-minute presentation that they saw it live, but you can send this to any of your friends by internet, just www.shareneolife.com. So David saw this presentation that you can see at that web address. He saw it live in person, and he went on the shake. Well, his fasting blood sugar, which I'm not a diabetic authority, but I understand that means that when you wake up, that's your sugar level. Well, his went from 300 to 146 in one day. Okay, so almost to the perfect level, because 80 to 120. Well, now he runs like right around 120. He's the same levels as a non-diabetic. Well, that's really good, because I know a lady right here in Eugene, she's had 2 toes amputated. Well, that can make it harder to walk. They can get all kinds of problems, lose their sight, kidney problems, etc. And we have one friend that she's off her diabetic medication now, clear off. So we're seeing lots of diabetics get great results. So David is running in the perfect range. And Chandel has won, I think, $2,000 in the challenge. I think David's won $1,000. Okay, and then Bradley and I are friends with Carlos, and I'm sure John knows Carlos, and does anybody else, and Hanson's know Carlos, and Janice does? Wonderful man, he went from $450 down to $199. Well, there it is, 26 months. You guys, isn't that incredible? Yeah. So that guy has a new life. So it's just shocking, the benefits of the product. Diabetes, there's a family in Spokane. Have anybody here seen eczema? Real bad eczema where it's bleeding and cracking? There's a guy up north of Spokane that his son has it. Not mild case, I mean bleeding and cracking, and on the shakes his eczema is gone. His daughter has celiac. You guys have heard of gluten intolerance, everyone's heard of that now. Well, if it got bad, I guess it causes pain in their gut and all that, and on the shakes her pain is going away. So, and his mother has full body tremors. I haven't heard of that before, but he said his mom's body would jump 6 inches to 18 inches all the time, and the doctors couldn't do anything for it. And I asked, could they do anything? He said no, because she's allergic to every medication they have. So she lived with that. Well, on the shakes, her body tremors are gone. Is that cool? And so when she talks about it, she started crying. I met her in Chihuahua about 2 weeks ago. So what that product will do is just is blowing my mind. You know, so many benefits. And of course, Carlos feels better too. Okay, so we want people to join our cause to help reverse the trend because we know it can help people huge. So here's some of the benefits if you want to join our cause, not just as a club member to buy it wholesale and get free product, but as a promoter to teach people how to have better health, improve their health. Here's some things. Here's the same benefits that club members get for promoters. And they can make an extra $500,000, $5,000, or $10,000 plus per month simply promoting the NeoLife Club, which is showing people how to get their nutrition right here. Okay, so the way you can do that, pick up an extra $15,000 a year if you want to. If you want to join our cause to end the trend, simply refer 3 club members, help them get their health pack free, and then help 3 promoters do the same. And that size business there will bring in an extra $15,000 a year for you. Not all of us want to do that. Some of us just want to use the product, but if you want to join our cause in helping other people, this is what can happen. Now, if you develop 5 directors, and that's a director there, these are people who want a nice career, and they can average over 100,000, the people that do that in a year. So the people that want to do that, they have 4 choices of kits. Senior manager kit, they can save over $250 with that, and that helps give them lots of samples to introduce to their friends. They can do a manager kit, and they'll save over $100 with that. This kit over 50 or entry level is $49, and that'll get you started to help people in the trend. So you can just choose whichever one's best for you. You can enjoy great products for free as a club member with the 3 for free, or you can do it part-time or full-time as professional income as a club promoter. So that is the end of our presentation, and what we want to do now is, Donna, could you come up and share? Donna's had some remarkable results. Let's welcome John back up here.
So, any questions? A question?
One of the questions that I get asked a lot with Pro Vitality is because if you took the individual products, the salmon oil, the carotenoids, and then they say 3 capsules is considered a serving.
Yep.
Well, how would you respond to that question?
Well, the question is, how come when you look at the label of the products individually, it says 3 salmon oil or 3 carotenoids are the recommended amount? And the reason we do that is what we want to do is start people off pretty simply, so we don't want to overload them with like 10 or 12, even though I take more than that. It takes a while to get used to that sort of thing in your diet, 1. And secondly, we're only trying to get to nutritional significance, what we call that threshold. If you remember, in the U.S., in the recommendations for omega-3 fatty acid consumption from the American Heart Association, it said 2 grams a week, or the equivalent of 2 fish servings a week of omega-3s. Well, if you take our product, you get essentially about, for 7 days, you'll get that 2 grams. Those 7 capsules will provide 2 grams. The other thing is each carotenoid complex capsule that's in there represents a serving of the fruits and vegetables it's made from. So if you were to take the carrots, tomatoes, spinach, red bell peppers, peaches, strawberries, and apricots and made a salad, and then filled a salad plate with that, that would be the equivalent of what you're getting. So what we want to do is we want to make nutritionally significant amounts, not necessarily the clinically proven best amount you can take, but nutritionally significant amounts that comply with and fulfill the guidelines of the American Heart Association, USDA, and so on, the amounts that we know start people on that path towards
Do you
better
think a lot of
nutrition.
people take that and then supplement in more?
Yeah, I think, nutrition is a personal thing. You actually get to know what works for you. You start with something. You got to start somewhere. There's no better place to start than filling those big fruit and vegetable, whole grain, and omega-3 gaps, because those are the things that are rampant in the population. But later on when you get in, you might find that, I'm a teacher. I go to school, and my immune system is under a little more stress than the average person, so I really want to focus on my immune system. So you take more carotenoid complex, perhaps add some vitamin C, things that promote your immune function. Or you might find that you know, I have a concern for heart disease in my family, so I want to focus more on nutrients that are involved in heart health. Or maybe you just like that and you want to worry about osteoporosis, so you take one of our calcium supplements or whatever it might be. You sort of custom tailor your nutritional intake based upon understanding your diet and filling those gaps in your diet, and then working on the things that are of greatest concern to you. You're welcome. Yes?
Question is, what is the difference between Formula 4
Mhm. Yep.
and those vitamin vitamins?
Okay, the question is, what is the difference between Formula 4, which is a gelatin capsule-based multivitamin mineral supplement that we've had in the product line for decades, and the multivitamin and mineral and treanin that's present in this product? And essentially, the differences are very small. Formula 4 has a lot more iron in it, for example, and in the general population, though we want to have some iron, we don't really worry about that being a big demand. So there's less iron present in this. The amount of omega-3 fatty, or the amount of whole grain lipids and sterols is essentially the same in Formula 4 as it is in this product. But the amounts of and range of nutrients, there are more of the trace minerals in the Pro-Vitality than you would get in Formula 4 as well. So the differences really relate to the role that we're trying to fulfill. And in this particular case, we want to focus primarily on the fruits and vegetables and whole grains and so on, but have a broad, much more broad spectrum of vitamins and minerals and trace elements. Yes, sir.
Recently, due to a condition I've developed, I'm taking more supplements than before, and so I'm faced with the question of, is it better to take them morning and evening, or spread them out through the day? Is there a strain on my kidneys if I do it with? Do I need to drink more water as I take more supplements?
Well, everybody needs to drink more water, whether they're taking supplements or not, because hardly anybody gets hydrated fully in any given day. So more water is good. Generally, I don't know what products you're taking, but the difference between ours and many out there, because ours are drawn from food and are proportioned in the amount that you would get from eating those foods. For example, a carotenoid complex is equal to a serving of carrots, tomatoes, spinach, et cetera, and a single omega-3 capsule is equivalent to about a half of what you would get from a serving of salmon. Because the doses are so small relative to the sort of horsepower race you can get out there with some, it enters your body just like food and is metabolized just like food, and therefore doesn't have any of the problems. Now, you can take a lot of products, and it's no harm in spreading them out throughout the day. Matter of fact, because they are food supplements, taking them with food, whether it's your dinner or your lunch or your breakfast, can be helpful. There's also certain nutrients, like minerals, for example, calcium, for example, that are probably better taken late in the day and evening, because most of calcium metabolism happens while you're sleeping. So depending upon the nutrient, there may be timing. We have a paper that we wrote that you can get from the company, and it says, how do I make the best use of my dietary supplements, my NeoLife supplements? And it goes through and talks about every one of them, what they do, and why you might take, when and why you might take them at certain times. So, but for the most part, because they're food, it's not an issue, and they're best taken with food. Yes?
I have a question. I have suffered with high calcium for about 5 years, and I recently had a parathyroid surgery, and now I have to take calcium. This was just in March. And so they had me taking Tums, like 2,000 a day. And I've switched over to the calcium with NeoLife. And so I'm taking 3 of those today, but I am not sure about that dosage.
Well, okay, did you guys hear the question, okay? She recently had elevated calcium and had some thyroid surgery, and afterwards they told her that she needs to take calcium regularly
Yeah, the parathyroid.
to deal with the parathyroid, but they recommended Tums. Okay. So, a couple of things to consider. First of all, Tums do contain some calcium, but they are an antacid. So when you add them, because of the mechanism by which you're adding them, you are giving yourself calcium, but you're depleting a rather vital component of your digestive tract called the availability of hydrochloric acid. You could get hyperchlorhydria, they call it, or a lack of hydrochloric acid in your stomach that will compromise digestion. If you compromise digestion, even though you're eating a really good nutrient-dense diet, you don't get the value of that because they don't get digested, they don't get absorbed, and they just pass right through. So the problem with what they're recommending to you is that they're not taking anything else into consideration. They are focused just on calcium, but there are ways to raise your calcium level without messing with your digestive tract. Okay. So they want you to get, apparently, they want you to get to 2 grams of calcium a day.
Something like that.
1,500 to 2,000 milligrams.
Yeah.
That's 2 grams, okay, for 1.5 to 2 grams, and that's a lot, okay? But basically what I would tell you to do is think about calcium-rich foods first. So, dairy products, non-fat milk, I don't know if you're lactose intolerant, you can get it with and without lactose these days, with and without just about anything, but non-fat milk is a very good source of calcium. So, cottage cheese, yeah, lots of those things. So look at the serving size and start looking first to food rather than to this cheap and dirty drug. Okay, so look first to food. And then when you start totaling up on the food, make those choices that get you where you want to go. This protein product right here contains quite a lot of calcium by itself. So if you were to have one of these, you would get something like 40% of your 1,000 milligrams. You're going for twice as much, so you have to think of it in that context. So that helps as well. Okay, so you eat a lot of calcium-rich foods. Then what you want to do is you just want to top off the rest with supplementation. Okay, I personally recommend our chelated CalMag. One reason is because calcium and magnesium are needed together, even in spite of your thyroid issues, they're still needed together. It's amino acid chelated, so it's very well tolerated and very quickly absorbed by the body. Okay, and it will not mess with your gastrointestinal tract. It will not cause this loss of hydrochloric acid, because the way it is put together, the calcium ion, when it's ionized, it's called divalent. It has 2 pluses on it, 2 plus charges. Then we neutralize those charges by putting an amino acid on each one of those. It's called a double amino acid chelation technology. And when it arrives in your stomach, it disintegrates very rapidly, dissolves quickly, and disperses into your intestinal media, which is the thing that you want to do without messing with the hydrochloric acid. And then because it's dispersed in the intestinal media, it creates a high probability of absorption. That, coupled with the fact that your body loves amino acids, means that it will preferentially get absorbed across the intestinal membrane. And that just works wonderful.
My husband has a question.
Husband has a question?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Did you know you had a question?
I was informed.
You were informed. Okay. I've been there.
Along the way, I played a lot of sports and that, but anyway, to make a long story longer, I ended up having my knees replaced,
Mhm.
and then through that process, I ended up getting MRSA staph infection.
Oh, my goodness.
And that was kind of a game changer. But out of all of that, I ended up with this disease called chondrocalcinosis.
Wow.
I don't know if you've ever.
It's very rare.
Yeah, it's very rare, and it's it's like your DNA, that switch comes on.
Mhm.
So it's, whatever I went through, click that switch on.
Yeah.
And it's called studio gout.
Mhm.
So it's instead of the regular gout, it's potassium
Uh-huh.
instead of the amino acids. So I just wanted to, in relation to that, this product.
Well, I think it would be good for a couple of reasons. First of all, despite what's going on there, all the rest of your biochemistry still needs caring for. Sometimes people get fixated on, like like in your case, I had to replace my knee and it caused this problem. And they forget that their heart and their lungs and their brain and everything else still needs to be fed and cared for. So in that regard, I would say yes. In terms of your condition, the condition he's talking about, it's induced often as a result of what we consider medical trauma. And when they went through the process of replacing his knees and everything that went on after that, they created some biochemical changes that flipped some switches in his body on how it utilizes certain nutrients and causes this rare 1 in maybe 250,000 or 300,000 people type of situation. The good news is that it exists and they know how to manage it pretty well. The problem is, in that particular disease, you will probably need to have whatever sort of drug management program they've got you on forever until we learn how to get inside you and flip the switch back the other way. So it's sort of like if you have a big physical trauma, like you get run over by a Mack truck or something, you know, you'll survive it, but you have all these residual things that go on. And sadly, I don't know that we can undo it. I can tell you though, that by focusing on these sorts of programs, no matter what your condition is, it will promote your overall quality of life. Okay? And the last thing that you want to have is a problem and then add heart disease to it or add some other thing to it. And that's the real risk factor of getting something like this happen and then focus all your attention on that one thing, and in the meantime something else is going sideways. So I'd be real cautious about making sure you don't forget that your brain is an organ that needs to be fed.
John, could you suggest for Shelley how much CalMag might be valuable for her?
Sure. Well, again, you know, if you look on the bottle, the label is very, very straight up. Okay. So let's say that you figure out a way to get to 1,000 or 1,200 milligrams of calcium through food, okay? And you want to get to this 1,500 milligram threshold. 3 CalMag will get you to the 1,500 milligram threshold. And because of the extra bioavailability, it will probably, in a biological sense, be equivalent to another 500 or 600 milligrams because it gets in so easily. Most calcium, most minerals are poorly absorbed in the body simply because of their reactivity. But because we keep it with these amino acids, that reactivity goes away. So you have a much higher bioaffinity, bioavailability ratio.
Anybody else? Janice?
I'm across the rating and I live here.
Tinnitus or tinnitus.
Yeah, it's kind of recent.
Yep. I had it too. Comes from sitting in a foxhole when I was in the army and concussive hearing loss. Yeah. The flavonoids, water soluble compounds, flavonoids are actually good for ringing in your ears. If you watch Jeopardy, okay, or any of those, you'll hear them advertising this lipoflavonoid. Okay. It's exactly what it is. The lipoflavonoid is sort of an oxymoron because flavonoids are water soluble and lipids are obviously lipids. It's the flavonoid component. Well, again, you look for, you know, I recommend eat blueberries. Okay. People, when you think about things, think about the food solution as you're thinking about, you know, our products are food supplements, not food substitutes. You won't get there without the product, help of the product. But think about adding blueberries and red cherries and the blackberries and whatever sort of things that are seasonally here that are those flavonoids. Wine with or without the alcohol, that's fine. You know, Concord grape juice, as long as you get the kind that's standardized for polyphenol. All of those sorts of things. And then Tray, our product Tray, is a very powerful source of polyphenols. All flavonoids are part of the family of nutrients called polyphenols, but not all polyphenols are flavonoids. So when we talk about polyphenols, it includes flavonoids. That's a really, really dense, nutrient-dense form. Way to get that. Just an ounce or two of that stuff a day will give you the equivalent of like 20 ounces of pomegranate juice or something like that. Yes?
You have an address, www something, and I don't know how the address for the NeoLife Farm or just for anything on the internet.
It's for a 30-minute presentation, www.shareneolife.com.
Was that one?
That's the
I
website.
don't know. Yes?
I just have one question about the calcium again. Is it when we say our products are food supplements,
Mhm.
but then you get to the calcium, sometimes I people challenge me on it, but that's not really something I'm stuck.
It's not a food in the sense of what? Because we get the calcium from seashells.
Yeah,
Okay.
you don't eat seashell.
Well, actually, we do eat a lot of shells normally if you look around, but generally we don't eat seashells. And the reason we do that is because we're looking for pure calcium carbonate. Calcium carbonate is CaCO3. It is the most dense form of calcium that exists anywhere in all of creation. So when we extract that, we go to that point and we remove that CaCO3. It comes from a living thing. It's organic in the sense that it was formed by a living thing, right? It just happened to be that the living thing that was inside is gone and the shell's left behind. So we could get it from bones of animals, but bones of animals tend to get too many other things in them that we don't like. So we get it from these seashells. We extract the CO2 rather, and then we take the CO portion off, and it leaves just the calcium behind, and then we bind these two amino acids to it. So essentially, it's derived from in the biology of the system, though we don't eat the shells directly, we get it the same way. We get calcium the same way in our diet, but we just use it as the source. It's a pure biological source of CaCO3. Okay, complicated answer, I
I think
understand.
it's a good one. I was trying to get that, I wish I could say that in 1 second. Yeah, perfect. But I'll try.
Yeah, well, what we're after, again, we have to remember, what we are after in this case is a pure source of calcium. Everywhere you look for calcium, if you're not careful, like bones of animals or so on, you find contaminants, things like heavy metals and the like, tend to end up in the bones. So we tend to stay away and go to these very ultra-pure sources, which are these seashells. And by taking the seashell, we only want the calcium in it. So we take out just the calcium itself, which exists as CaCO3. We extract that. We take off the CO3 portion, which is some oxygen and carbon, right? The CO stands for carbon and oxygen. We get rid of that, leaves just the Ca, which is the calcium, to which we bind these amino acids. And in this particular case, it's the amino acid glycine, which we get from plant sources. We put that on the molecule and create this calcium glycinate, which is a double amino acid chelated form of elemental calcium.
I mean, it's just like.
We actually have that answer recorded someplace. I don't know whether- It's not the first time it's been asked.
Okay, maybe one last question, and then we'll wrap, and then you can come up and talk to John as long as he'll be here. Tom, go ahead.
Not much longer.
So, we know that 3 of the omega, the salmon oils is 1 serving of fish. How many train-in concentrate capsules equal 1 serving of whole grain?
Well, you know what? Excuse me. Let me do some math here for you and see if we can figure it out. If you look at that slide that I put up there at the end, or I talked about at the end of 30 days, you would have got the equivalent, I think it was 10 pounds of whole grain is the number. So you're getting the equivalent of about 1/3 of a pound of whole grain a day. Okay, now 1/3 of a pound of whole grain is essentially 5 or 6 ounces. And generally, a serving is considered 100 grams, or about 3.3 ounces in terms of how you measure it in a dietary sense. Okay, so that would give you the equivalent of about 1 to 1.5 servings of whole grain a day in each capsule. The liquid and sterile equivalent of 1 to 1.5 servings of whole grains in each capsule. Okay, so the math is simply looking at the total value, and I just work backwards out of that 10 pounds deep, work back down to about 1/3 of a pound a day, and then relate it to serving sizes. Generally, when you think about servings, just so you know, a serving, when you're on a diet, they say something the size of the palm of your hand or whatever. A serving in the purely nutritional analytical sense is standardized to be about 100 grams. It tends to go metric, simply because it's easier to work in metric numbers when you're dealing with these things. So about 100 grams. That would be about 3.3 ounces. It varies a little bit depending upon what you're after. It takes a little more than 100 grams of salmon to get to that gram of omega-3 fatty acids we were talking about. In that case, it's about 5 ounces. But for all intents and purposes, that 100 grams is a great place to start.
Okay, I guess we will take 2 more. Janice had one, and Donna, did you have one?
So in
Oh,
the
yes.
train-in, there is no gluten.
No. Okay, let me just explain this. There's this problem with gluten, okay? And the problem with gluten is not just the fact that gluten's there, because it's a real problem for people with celiac disease. But the problem is that the way that the government and the way that the world looks at gluten is they look at it purely from this perspective of food. So I'll give you an example. Okay? The rule is that you can claim your product to be gluten-free if it doesn't exceed 20 parts per million. Okay? So what that means is that in 1 million micrograms, which 1 million micrograms would only be a gram, but in 1 million micrograms You could have 20 micrograms, and as long as it's less than that, you would be gluten-free. So now, let's go back to this serving idea. If you take a bowl of some gluten-free cereal, okay, that bowl is going to be about 100 grams of gluten-free cereal. Okay? 100 grams would be 100 million micrograms. And 20 parts per million would be 2,000 micrograms, or 2 milligrams. So you can consume a bowl of gluten-free cereal and still get about 2 milligrams of gluten. And that's just because that's the way the food industry likes to calculate it. And it sort of works for big things like food. Okay? Now, if you take our tree and end capsule, for example, okay, we don't have, the amount of wheat that we pull out of there wouldn't be 2 milligrams or 2,000 micrograms, there wouldn't be 200 micrograms, there wouldn't even be 100, but it wouldn't even be 50 micrograms. But analytically, it's below the level of detection, but analytically down in there someplace, it's going to be a few micrograms of this stuff. So when you say it's gluten-free, these days we can count things down to parts per trillion, so it would be inappropriate of me to say that it's gluten-free. Is it celiac safe? Yes. It's the threshold as determined by the medical community for gluten in a celiac diet is 50 milligrams a day. Not all at one time, but in the course of the day, 50 milligrams. You'd have to take like 100 or 200 Trianin to get anywhere near that number. We don't recommend that per day. So essentially, people who have celiac disease and or are celiac sensitive or so on, this would be fine. Just as an aside, I've actually put together a little team of people at the Council for Responsible Nutrition to approach the Celiac Society and point out to them the problem with this regulatory sort of structure they have, that the 20 parts per million thing doesn't really apply in dietary supplements. It applies to food if you're talking bread or you're talking cereal, because it's a big volume of things. But when you're talking just bioactives from that, it doesn't really apply, and they are unjustifiably, and to the detriment of the celiac sufferers, scaring them away from things that might otherwise be a tremendous benefit. Is that it? Okay. Well, listen, it's been fun. I got just a few minutes here before I have to catch a plane up. I'm a frequent visitor of PDX. I think I told you that earlier. It's in and out all the time. I'd like to leave you with just one thought. When you decide to embrace nutrition and health, don't look at it as something that you're going to do in the short term. Everybody should just recognize that it's logical, and of course, how well you care for this piece of biochemistry that you occupy is going to determine how well it serves you. Okay. If you treat it well, it's going to reward you with maybe 100 years of health, vitality, and long life, and cognitive capacity to know that you enjoyed it the whole way. If you don't care for it, it's not going to do that. In all probability, it will punish you. It will punish you with achy joints, or weak hearts, or high blood pressure, or an inability to remember that you had achy joints, weak hearts, and high blood pressure. So look at it as a life-changing deal. That's the only way we're going to change the end of the trend. Okay? Thank you, Bob.
Very good. Thank you so much, John. We appreciate you. And he'll be here just for a few more minutes to rehash the roads if you want to go talk to him quickly. And if you want to know more about the fitness challenge, the weight loss challenge, or the 3 for Free program, talk to Janice or Hanson's or Stephanie or I. And we thank you so much for coming. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.